So just to dovetail, so Steve kind of laid out the idea of the model, a little bit more on the model code process and how different ACI committees and what some of our documents, where they land in the model code. But I want to kind of go the next step further, and those model codes get adopted by the states, right, and the local jurisdictions. So I'm going to kind of move into a little bit more of that, and then what procedures, what we have in place here at ACI so far to engage our members and how they're being asked to help out in this process. So how many of you in engineering school had a class on how to advocate for codes or standards? Nobody, right? Okay, so as professionals, this is really kind of a not all engineers, understand. We get placed in positions where we need to learn quickly to do this, but it's a super important part, especially with ACI here. We have, as Steve mentioned, all these amazing documents, these committees with brilliant people that do great research, and then they develop these codes, these standards, but now we need to get them out, right? We need to get them out and people using them. So again, we'll just kind of move on. Learning objectives that we already kind of talked about, but I'm going to really talk more about opportunities for our members and the resources that we have available to help with advocacy. So advocacy, with Steve and I being brought on board after the ACI board updated their mission to include advocacy and outreach as a specific item, we went back and actually ACI, one of the very first chapter, the Southern California chapter of ACI, had it in their mission for advocacy and outreach. So if you look at way back when this was put together in 1958, is that correct? Oh my gosh, okay, I can't. So their mission was to stimulate participation and interest in the programs of ACI, including educating local authorities, so that education and outreach was there in their mission. The value of referencing the ACI building code in the concrete portions of their local building code. So they were already, their vision was to go out and advocate for the documents that were specifically the building code in the local jurisdiction. So it's not a new thing. It is maybe more emphasis now with some of the activity we're doing, but it's always kind of been in that mission of ACI, that advocacy and outreach. So advocacy for our policies, supporting the documents out there, and then outreach, getting our members to go out and actually do that outreach. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Couple questions that I had. So more than 400 technical documents. Steve talked a little bit about some of those key documents and where they land in the model code. But anybody know how many codes ACI has? I'm going to throw this out. I'm just going to get it. So 24 codes that are there at this point, and several more that are being developed right now within different committees within ACI. Specifications, over 40 specifications, and then hundreds of reports and guides developed. So all of these items here are, again, when we do this for the public good, we do this as an industry, experts that we feel we have this expertise and then can offer it for these building codes and these jurisdictions. Certification programs. Any of you involved with certification programs know how many certification programs? Wild guess at this? 30 certifications. That's a lot of programs we offer. And some of these, again, we have referenced in some of our documents, but lots of different opportunities for getting certification programs identified within the codes. So just in general here, what is our strategy for advocacy? What are we trying to achieve? We want to get our standards and programs referenced in these general building codes that Steve just spent a few minutes laying the outline for. We want to remove provisions that are already addressed in the ACI standards. Steve kind of alluded to this. Sometimes we look at, we want to make sure that our standards are referenced with as little modification as possible. And if there's any conflict with what we're trying to do and what we see that's out there, we try to make and clarify that. And that does happen more than what we think. So something that, as far as advocacy, we look out for. Keeping our references current. This is another one, and I'll get more into this. local jurisdictions, states adopt different model codes in different years. I'm in the state of Michigan. They are under the 2015 building code. I mean, so what we want to do is when we bring in references, make sure that they're up to date on that. So it's kind of, there's a lot of different parts moving there. And then update existing standards and develop new ones. Steve mentioned a little bit about this as well. The water shapes, we have new codes that are coming out, and we want to make sure that they're going to be placed properly within the model building codes, and that you have that process going to do that. Again, why do we participate? The public good, safety, health, welfare, our documents, we are the experts, right? ACI, we have the experts in the concrete field. We want to get that out there, as well as for industry, the expectations. Then when we have the standards and the codes, we have that industry cohesiveness and that expectation. So again, just briefly before I get into a little more detail, again, Steve talked about the model building code. Those model building codes are referenced in general building codes, which then are adopted. Generally, we're looking at states and local jurisdictions that are doing that. So he mentioned too, our ACI code advocacy portal. And this is really what we're really trying to do, is get out our advocacy efforts. We have a location now. We have some space on the ACI, on some web pages here. We have a ACI code advocacy portal, a code officials portal, where we put this information, where we are putting some of the information that outlines what we're doing in some of our efforts. We do have here a new video that we just came out with, and I'm going to show it here in a second. It's just a couple minutes long that kind of summarizes what we're trying to do, what our mission is with advocacy. And you know, we work a lot with not only with our committees, but with our marketing folks, our professional development folks within ACI to get this message out. And that's where we'd like to, you know, get more feedback from our members. How can we better get out the information for advocacy and work with our members to do that? So I am going to, let's see, how do we, go ahead, Jim. Just show this short video that we put together with our marketing group. Talk a little bit about advocacy.
The American Concrete Institute envisions a future where everyone has the knowledge needed to use concrete effectively to meet the demands of a changing world. A safely built environment can be achieved by following the design, construction, and testing of concrete as required by ACI codes, standards, and certifications. ACI committees and members spend thousands of hours each year developing and maintaining new and current codes, standards, and certification programs on behalf of the concrete industry. So what happens when an ACI committee completes or updates a document or certification program and makes it available to the public? With over 30 codes, 40 specifications, hundreds of guides and manuals, and more than 30 certification programs, the Institute and its volunteers work to get this knowledge referenced in model codes, leading to adoption by authorities having jurisdiction, such as states, cities, and other government agencies, to ensure the use of concrete in a manner which results in a safely built environment. When an authority having jurisdiction adopts an ACI code or standard, or requires a certification program for inspection and testing, it becomes law and is enforceable by a building official or other designated official. Advocacy and outreach by ACI members and staff are a key component and sets in motion the requirement for the use of the document or program by law. The American Concrete Institute's continued reapproval of ACI codes, standards, and certifications contributes to public good and overall safety. This international endeavor is empowered by our members' willing and ongoing participation in code advocacy. Please join us in this collaborative effort for the adoption of ACI documents and certification programs by visiting concrete.org/advocacy.
So just an example, a short video with some of our marketing folks that we put together to kind of share this vision, you know, this mission of what we're trying to do. So let's get into a little bit more about how we've had worked with some of our members, some of our committees to get some of their documents out there, and some of the new documents that are that are being developed and what some of the plans are for that. So when we look at adoption of the different model codes on regional and local different levels, when we're looking at states, there's a lot of variety. Okay, so from the East Coast to the West Coast, a lot of different backgrounds as to why a state or a jurisdiction would adopt certain codes, and that's something we need to be aware of when we go in and work in a jurisdiction. And a lot of that has to do with climate, right? So when we look at, for example, in South and North Carolina, where we worked with some advocacy on repair, is going to be those code officials that use of that code in that climate and that jurisdiction might be very different from a jurisdiction on the West Coast or in the Midwest. So we need to really be aware of what the local use and benefits of that code is going to be able to discuss that with the local code officials and those who are actually adopting it. Politics plays a part in it as well. We hate to get, as engineers, we might not always be comfortable with the politics, but it is there when it comes to code advocacy. We get a little bit into that. So we look at a whole bunch of different other reasons why we look at where we look at getting our codes adopted and why it's important. So Steve had put up this slide. I think his was in purple a little bit, but this is just an example quickly, and I'm going to just kind of hone in on a couple states to give you an example of where we've been doing some work and how that worked with advocacy. So this is the map that shows where the ICC, the International Building Code, is either referenced as a mandatory document within that jurisdiction, or if it's permissive, or if there's no code in that state. So you can see the green, those are the states that have a mandatory requirement for adopting the codes. There's the white, there is no. It's kind of whatever the jurisdiction feels is the best model code, how they want to do that. And then you kind of have some in between on these permissive locations. So just to give you an example, in Arizona. So we have, Arizona's a white state as far as where there's no requirement for the building code to be adopted. So what happens there then is you have a county or a city, and they kind of develop in their own process and they adopt their own model codes, what they feel is important. And just looking here, we had a request from an ACI chapter out of the Phoenix area, and they really wanted to see the 562 repair code brought into that community. So in Arizona, a lot of the code development really centers around where the urban cities are, right? So Phoenix has a code. They adopt the ICC model codes, and this is what they're at. They're on the 2018 IBC building code. They're on the 2009 International Energy Conservation Code. So they're kind of all over the board. They pick and choose what they feel is right for their jurisdiction. So we worked locally with that ACI chapter there, who they had members who obviously knew of the 562 repair code. They identified there was a great need in actually Phoenix, which is Maricopa County. So Maricopa County does most of the code development, and then a lot of the other jurisdictions within the state kind of follow what Maricopa County does. So it's very important in what we do there, because it might be adopted in other areas. So there's some work going on where we're going to then look and see where we can try to reference the ACI 562 repair code within the Maricopa County code. So this is, again, an example where the local ACI chapter, and as well as some of the International Concrete Repair Institute ICRI members, came together and saw a need for the use of a code within their community, and then we can go in and start talking to that jurisdiction and get into their development process. So one example. Another example where we've done quite a bit of work working with local advocacy is in South Carolina. So South Carolina, different from Arizona, they have a mandatory code within their state, and the local jurisdictions are required to to adopt and to oversee those codes. So, and they adopt the newest codes on a regular 3-year cycle, so they keep that updated pretty regularly. So we had the opportunity to go in a few years ago and offer to them the ACI 562 repair code. And that was really, again, it was local chapter, the Carolinas chapter, as well as the Carolinas chapter of the International Concrete Repair Institute. We had some other organizations locally in South Carolina say, we feel this is an important code. What would be one thing you would think in South Carolina that would be important for having a standard on repair? What do you think in South Carolina? It's a pretty harsh environment, right? Hurricane, salt, a lot of, it's a harsh environment. So there was a need for that. We also had, again, local folks there who had information on why they felt it was important to bring it in. So interesting enough, South Carolina does not adopt the international existing building code. So how do you bring in a repair code when they don't have an existing building code? You can bring it in through the building code. So we had to look at their code, how it was set up, work with the local folks there and come up with the language and then present that to their building through their code development process to get it into their building code. So it's not always a straightforward, it goes, an ACI code fits perfectly in this location. In this instance, we had to bring in a repair code through the building code, which is just how we had to do it. So that's just another example here of the wide variety of differences and why it's really important that our members in those jurisdictions were able to step up and help work with us. We had, again, the ACI, the Carolinas chapter folks who were very passionate about this, working to help guide us through and get this code referenced in the South Carolina Building Code. So again, our priorities, we want these current codes adopted. We want them adopted by reference. We want to remove any duplicative language that we see in some of the local codes. And we want to look at opportunities where, we have some new codes that are out. We have our thermal bridging code that just came out, our 440 code that just came out. Are there opportunities in different states or jurisdictions where these codes might be very helpful? And Steve and I can do this, and we have a kind of a big picture, but really what we need are those in those states and jurisdictions working as design professionals to kind of keep an eye out and let us know so we can come in and start doing that work. So what we kind of here is just a little bit of, what are some of the things that we're working with ACI members to collaborate on. So we'll get into a little bit more detail how this works. This fact finding. How many in here have ever sat in on a building code commission meeting for your town or your state that you live in? I'm from Michigan. I because of what I do now, I've sat in on the Michigan Building Code Commission that meets 4 times a year, and they have committees. It's a different process, but that's where you find out how those codes are being developed and what's important in that jurisdiction, and maybe some new activity that's coming up that can help generate ideas. And maybe there would be, once we sit in and realize how that's working, we can see where ACI fits in. And we can come in and we can provide that information. So that's one thing is and that could be through your chapter activity. It could be just through other organizations you might be involved with. But the fact finding is there, and then kind of getting back with staff, Steve and I, to kind of then start that process. Case studies. So, and this came up in South Carolina and North Carolina where we did some work. There were some real need with some issues with repair and some things that had not, gone right. So they wanted to, make sure that this code coming in would help to bring in that knowledge that was needed in the community and with the engineering community. Relationships are important. Do we know our code officials? Do we know people sitting on the structural committees within our states who are making the decisions on what codes are being referenced? Anytime we can build that relationship. And again, Steve mentioned, that relationship is important because those code officials are voting on whether our documents will come into the code. I mean, so it behooves us to know them and be able to educate them, right? The proposal development, we work on that. Being proponents, we'll have a little testimony here, but when we go into especially a state jurisdiction and work, we need to have a lot of folks on board with helping to support that proposal. We can go in and say, ACI's here, we have a great document, but they want to know, we need to have other folks involved. For example, with the repair code, the International Concrete Repair Institute, their people also supported. ASCE, in some cases, we had support on a local level, and many other folks, AIA folks. So sometimes it takes a collaboration group to actually do this, and we'll show that a little bit more here in a minute. Testify. Steve kind of went through the model code process. It's pretty rigorous there. On the state level, it's similar format. Sometimes it's a little more informal, so it's not as intimidating. Some of our panel members here haven't been involved on that state process. And a lot of times it's really just maybe sitting on a or coming to a technical committee who's going to be making a decision and just doing a short presentation. If you're a member of a code committee who has a code we're trying to get referenced, your testimony as to how that document was developed and the research that went behind it and all the rigorous work that was done speaks 1,000 words to those technical people on that committee who are going to be making a decision. And rightfully so. They're going to make a decision for their jurisdiction. That's pretty important. And it's up to us to come to them and educate them on our document and what went into how that document was developed. And then testifying, public comment, and then again, new standards. We've got some new standards going. We need to then get education out on that and look and see where we can do some advocacy with that. So a couple different resources that we've developed. To get this process started, really ACI was in a position, 2017, the mission really brought forth this idea of advocacy, that our members are given direction to advocate for our documents, for our standards and our codes. And they put it in a position statement. And these statements are on the website, and I'll show you where they're located. And what it does is then gives us, as members, to go out and advocate for our documents, right? We've developed collaboration groups. This has probably been the most important step in when we're working in, especially on the state level and in local jurisdiction, how we collaborate and get these groups formed and get the expertise that's needed in that specific jurisdiction where we're going to go advocate. And I'll show you how that's set up. We have pages that are set up, and we have a specific kind of structure for how those collaboration groups work. We have our portals. Steve mentioned in one of his slides. We have an advocacy portal. We have a building code official portal, again, to start reaching out to those folks and giving them information that they can come to be more comfortable with ACI and our documents. And then we've been doing some things on social media. That little video was put together by our marketing group. We have some more videos coming out on some of the progress that we've had and some of the successes on the model code level. So I'll just end with doing, just kind of showing you a couple examples there. So our position statements. So a lot of other groups do this, ASCE, if you're involved in, AIA, some of those other national type of associations and groups, they all have position statements, which kind of, it's just a statement that says what their organization will champion, and we have a lot. We've, in the last couple of years, and actually Steve has championed putting a lot of these statements together for our board to vote on, and then we now have these available on our website. So we have a lot: sustainability, carbon neutrality, engineering curriculum was the last one. So we advocate for our universities to have good concrete related curriculum, and we support that as ACI, right? We support that, so that makes sense. Here on the ACI website, so if you go to the top of the page, when you go to our main page that you land on for ACI, right up at the top, in these little blue letters is position statements. In there, then it will list all of the, how many do we have now? Quite a few, a dozen or so. And it will list all the different position statements and what that entails. And then another thing we have on there, I think Steve kind of showed this as well, is well, first of all, for our collaboration groups, same thing. And the way we set up the collaboration groups, we have a great system for our technical committees. So those of you on technical committees know there are committee pages that you go to where all your documents and everything is kept there, and the membership is organized and who's voting members and all of that. So we thought, that's a pretty good process. These collaboration groups are a little more, not quite as structured as that, but really it's a place where you go where we put our documents that we're working on when we're advocating in different jurisdictions. So right now we have 17, it just went up by one number, Ohio. The state of Ohio, we've identified a code change proposal that we believe will be submitted and reviewed as they look to update to the 2021 codes in Ohio in this next year. So we've submitted 2 proposals. One is to reference 440 in their 440, the GFRP code in that state code, as well as our 122 thermal bridging code. So we have 17 committees now. So these are the states where we have collaboration groups started. Within each of those states, we then have a breakout of who's on the collaboration group and then what documents we're working on. So how that works is when we've identified an opportunity in a state, we then send out to the membership, ACI membership in that state, as well as the committee members who are directly related to developing that code, and we let them know we're going to start the process. So a couple weeks ago in Ohio, all the Ohio ACI members got an email from ACI, we're going to begin working in your state. We'd love to have you participate. We sent out to the 440 committees, to the 122 committee, and said we are going to be working in Ohio and we'd love your support. And that committee that collaboration group is now going to start. And so the idea then is you have those members on the collaboration group in the state of Ohio who can then help write a letter, testify, and just help us. Maybe there's a relationship there with one of the ACI members, somebody we know, and we begin that process. This is an example. Again, we did some work the last a year or so ago in North Carolina, where we have our repair code now referenced in the North Carolina existing building code. This is kind of how the collaboration group looks. All right, so we have ACI members. We have some. Again, this was for the 562 repair code. We have some members of the 562 repair committee that joined the collaboration group. We had the local ACI Carolinas chapter, some members joined that collaboration group. Some ICRI, International Concrete Repair Institute, local chapter members join it. And others actually from the local Ready Mix Concrete Association chapter members also joined. So this is kind of an example of the collaboration group. So we had 15, 20 plus folks who were then really keyed in and met several times to help support this process of moving our document to get it referenced in the North Carolina Building Code. So just a little summary on what happened in North Carolina. So that process to get it referenced is about a 1.5 year process. It doesn't happen overnight. We just don't submit it and they say yes or no. It takes, as Steve mentioned, it's very much like the model code, the level where we go in, we have to educate their committee people, we have to give a short presentation, we have to come and testify. Our document is then open for public comment, so people from other industries and groups can come in and throw darts at it and say yes or no why they don't like it. So that process takes a while. So we started the process, it was 2019, and about a 1.5 years until that document finally got through the process, and just in January 2021 then became part of the code. So it doesn't happen overnight, but it is something that we definitely need to collaborate on. So But again, it took a lot of discussion. We had several meetings with the state of North Carolina. We got a lot of questions by their technical committee on it. We had ongoing education opportunities with their code officials. We had several people step up from the ACI Carolinas chapter to go to code official meetings to educate their code officials. And again, what did that do? For one thing, they know ACI is there now, and we are the experts in this area. So it was a great way to continue to develop our relationship with those officials in North Carolina, and to gain more credibility. I mean, they know ACI, but they might have not been real familiar with that particular document, but we need to educate them on that. So just to wrap up, we have them again on the portals. So we have that portal for our members for advocacy, and we also felt it was important to have a landing page where the code officials can come in and look for the information and the education, because again, they're the ones that many times that are going to be voting and agreeing on whether our documents are going to be referenced. A little bit on, I'm just going to kind of move here. Can't get it. We also have other ways that we've worked within ACI. We have an advocacy and outreach talk. We've been to several of the state chapters to kind of talk about this. So if more of you are engaged on your local chapter level, we come in, we can talk about how important and really kind of hone in on what's important in your particular area. Again, someplace like California, there's a lot going on in California on code development. Meeting here, we've had discussions, and that's something we can set up through our ACI chapter talks to talk about advocacy and maybe how to start engaging in advocacy with the local chapter. There's our building official page. I'll kind of move it. We have LinkedIn. We have our ACI LinkedIn advocacy we have out there, and just some other areas as well. So again, with the code officials, one of the things that we have learned, again, that relationship and education and building that awareness is really important. And we have our ACI chapters, but ICC, the building code officials, they also have similar chapters throughout the country and in the states. So many times there's opportunities for us as ACI to partner and maybe invite some of the code official chapters where we can educate them and we can learn from them as well. So we've seen a lot more states and ACI chapters reach out to their code official, the ICC chapters, and do that. And we'll be doing that in Michigan here coming up, where we're going to be presenting on the 440 code in Michigan, where we have introduced a proposal. So we can begin to educate those code officials on what that document looks like. So if you're in a position where you can champion some of that collaboration, I think that's great and a good way to do that. So just kind of a big picture overview on local advocacy, and now I'll leave it up to Jim to